Webb Chiles, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's an honor to have you here.
My, yeah, my pleasure.
I'm so curious about all of your circumnavigations, and I've read three of your books, Storm Passage and The Ocean Waits, and this what was the second one? Open Boat Across the Pacific, in reverse order. And I'm fascinated by all that, and I'm fascinated by your last circumnavigation, which I don't think you've written a book about, on your boat Gannet, which was a Moor 24, a boat that I think most people would think inappropriate for blue water work. How did you choose the Moor 24 for that voyage?
Well, I have said that I don't want to be like some old rock star who's always singing the songs of his youth, and I wanted new experiences. Not all of my circumnavigations, three of the six were cutting edge. The first, in which I made two stops and got what was then the world record for the fastest solo circumnavigation in a monohull, was the first American to go alone around Cape Horn. The second, which I mostly did in an 18-foot open boat, Drascombe Lugger. And then my last, Gannet, in an ultralight Moor 24. The middle three I did on a 36-foot Sparkman & Stevens designed boat called Resurgam, and another one-tonner, Heritage one-tonner. They were more conventional, mostly, although I went around one of them as well with Jill, who was then my wife. So I wanted a new experience. I actually bought Gannet. One of the facts about me is that I've been married 6 times to 5 women, and you might think that's pretty spacey, but you're going to have to realize that I was at sea a lot. I've spent probably 9 to 10 years alone at sea. I've probably been married more than anybody else you know. I probably spent more time totally alone than anybody else you know. And I've been married to Carol now for 30 years. It'll be 30 years since we met, and we're married within 2 months. She's a generation younger than I. We either had to make a commitment or not. So her career, she's an architect, took her to Chicago. We lived in Evanston. And I then owned the 37-foot Morgan 1-ton, which I called the Hawk of Tuonela, and kept her on a mooring in New Zealand's Bay of Islands, which is my favorite place in the world to live and have a boat. I'd live there full time if I could, but I can't. We were on close to Lake Michigan, and so I thought, I'll buy a little boat and sail it on Lake Michigan in the northern summers and go to New Zealand and sail the other boat in the northern winters. Well, having 2 boats and a wife separated by much of the world was too complicated, and I actually didn't enjoy sailing on Lake Michigan. I am pelagic. I like the open ocean. I do not like to know that land is 30 miles away on the other side. So I sold the boat in New Zealand. After 2 summers, I towed. I had a boat came with a trailer. Gannet is a $9,000 circumnavigator, although I put a lot more money into her than that, but that's what I paid for her to begin with, and $1,000 for the trailer that I later sold. Moved her to San Diego, where I have had a long history and have spent a lot of time, and decided to try to sail her alone around the world. Moor 20, she is a great boat. Moor 24s, they're raced now, as probably you know, successfully. This is a 50-year-old design that is still winning races. The first of the ultralight classes to be built in America, Santa Cruz boat. And they were intended to be raced around buoys and harbors. They are successfully raced, single and double-handed, from San Francisco to Hawaii, still have won the races. Nobody had gone beyond Hawaii, but I thought if you can go to Hawaii, you can go all the way around. And it is to the credit to Ron Moore and the people who built those boats. I've met Ron Moore since then, since the circumnavigation. He thanked me for taking one of his boats around. But it's fully to his credit as an honorable boat builder that he built a boat thinking it was going to sail on harbors, and it made it all the way around. It's been in 5-knot gales. The masthead has been in the water at least 3 or 4 times. And they sail beautifully. My priorities have always been with boats, sailing, performance, and aesthetics. I can adapt myself to the boat. Gannet interior has 38 inches of headroom. Well, I'm 6 feet 1 inch tall, and the only place I can sit upright is on the floorboard, sitting on a sporta seat facing aft against the main bulkhead. I'm 6'1". You probably can't see it, but I can. The beam is 7 feet 2 inches. I can reach side to side of the boat from where I'm sitting with just leaning forward. So I wanted a new challenge. I know I wanted to see if it was possible, and so and she totally has pleased me. She accelerates the well, people say who see her say she's small, think she's small. She only has 2 feet of freeboard. And my boat has no crap on her, no clutter. I've never had those kinds of things on boats. You can see the boat. You don't see all the other stuff that people put on boats. So the open boat weighed 600 pounds. Gannett displaces 600, 700 pounds. I don't remember the exact number. And so she certainly must have accelerated well, but Gannett accelerates like, she designates 2,050 pounds, half of that in the keel. You'll be going along 6, 7 knots. She'll pick up a little bit of wind or a wave, and all of a sudden you're doing double digits.
Wow.
The guys who race them get up near 20 knots, I'm told. The most I've ever seen has been just under 14, but
Wow.
I back off. My purpose is to get to the other side.
Yeah.
So
Gosh, that
anyway,
does sound
great
fun.
boat.
Yeah.
Great boat.
Well, obviously you must have enjoyed your circumnavigation on her. Can you describe a beautiful moment while sailing Gannett in your circumnavigation? Anyone?
Oh, going to. Well, there's in one of my videos. I'm a writer and a sailor and a lover of women. 3 things. I actually know what the hell I am. I always have. I have lived the life I wanted to live, and even better, understood it as I was living it. I'm not a videographer and have no desire to be one. But people ask me to start taking videos, so I take unedited videos with GoPros and my phone. Started in the Indian Ocean about halfway through. And all I do literally is, I spliced a few episodes together in one, but all I do is cut off a few seconds at the beginning and the end if I'm fumbling with the camera. It's raw footage. That's what it is. One of those, and I don't remember which one, it's between Balboa and San Diego, the last passage of that circumnavigation, which was the worst of the entire circumnavigation because there was no wind. It might be Balboa to San Diego 10. I'm sailing along and finally had some decent wind a bit. You have a libation towards sunset. I played a part of the soundtrack of the movie Out of Africa, which I first saw in Sydney, Australia, probably in 1987 or 88. And I talked about the woman I was with then and played that music. She's dead. Jill to whom I was married, died unexpectedly. She was a natural athlete, a runner. Long after we were divorced, died mid-stride running. Never thought that she would not outlive me. So anyway, yeah, that's a very nice moment. There were lots of nice moments. They're great. They're more, I often have said that people, at the beginning of Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, he says all happy families are alike, all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. The relevance of this to sailing is that people generally want to hear about the survival situations, not happy moments. And the pleasant moments outnumber the vastly. I've had computers, laptops on my boats from about the part of the 4th circumnavigation, all of the 5th, and the 6th. And so I've kept better records. Well, the 5th was on the Hawk of Tunella from New Zealand, Bay of Islands, west around. I did that in less than 18 months, calendar months. Actually, my sailing time was better than my world record time in a similar boat much earlier. Didn't plan that, but I ended up finding partway around that I could beat my old time, so I raced myself, and not surprisingly, I won. My sailing time that time on the 5th was 191 days. The world record time, which is ridiculously slow now, but these people are doing it in multi-million-dollar boats that are given to them, and I did it in a 37-foot engineless boat that I bought myself. It was 202 days and some hours. And I've just lost you a bit there. The
Oh,
screen went blank. Anyway, I broke Chichester's record. His time was 226 days.
hmm.
On that fifth circumnavigation, I think in that 191 sailing days, off the top of my head, there were only 4 days where I had gale force winds. That was a trade wind circumnavigation through Panama,
Hmm.
around Cape of Good Hope. So the good weather far outweighs the bad. I've been in Force 12, I believe, at least 8 times.
Gosh.
All of those were in the Southern Ocean, except for once
Hmm.
when I came out of the Southern Ocean after being south of 40 South for, I don't know, 3 months or more in the first circumnavigation. I came out and thought, well, fine, you're safe. Was going up through the Tasman and had a cyclone in the Tasman above 40
Wow.
South.
Wow. Yeah. Your earlier boats, most of them, if I'm not mistaken, had fin keel and skeg rudder. Is that something that you feel strongly about, or is that just what you wanted at the time, or do you think protecting the rudder is something that you're still concerned with? I mean, I'm sure Gannett didn't have that, but
No, I don't. Well, I don't think the only one that had a skeg rudder was Resurgam, the Sparkman and Stevens 36, She 36. Um,
oh, okay,
Egregious was partially protected by an extension that they all had fin keels, all had spade rudders
yeah,
except for Chidiac Tishborn, the open boat, which was a centerboard boat. Um, I think it's a good idea to protect the rudder with a skeg, but I'm not concerned about it. I think that there are, well, I think there are huge advantages, obviously, to having fin keels and spade rudders rather than old conventional full keel boats with barn door rudders. As far as it's possible, as far as I know this, that Egregious, the one I went around with my first circumnavigation, might have been the first fin keel spade rudder boat soloed around Cape Horn. I think I was about the 10th or 11th person to go around Cape Horn. Um, I don't know all the previous boats, but of all those ones I know, they were
hmm,
conventional boats. Um, I was, I wanted performance, and there's just it's obvious. I mean, when you just think about the physics, that a spade rudder is separated from the keel is much more efficient than
hmm.
the old style. Have airplanes gotten better in the last 100 years? Well, I think boats have too.
Yep, yep. Do you ever sail like a cruiser, or do you always go on big long journeys?
I don't like to day sail very much.
Hmm.
I like passages, and that actually has been a problem for me here. Um, uh, this coast, you're limited by the hurricane season. Not
Hmm.
not totally. I mean, I've sailed here up to the Chesapeake one hurricane season. Had to wait to leave for one pass down here. Had to anchor up in the Chesapeake and wait for one to pass south of me up there. So you can do it, but you wouldn't. I would not want to. It would be an unseemly risk to start crossing the ocean in the middle of the hurricane season.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a problem. I miss I've written about being in the monastery of the sea and settling into the solitude and the beauty and the natural rhythms that are out there. And I haven't much been able to do that on this coast.
Hmm. Now, you're in South Carolina near Hilton Head, somewhere around
I'm
there,
on
right?
Hill
You're
Island.
on Hilton Head. Okay. Do you
Yeah.
ever just want to sail to the Bahamas in the winter and kick around the islands there? And or does that
No,
interest you at all? No.
I mean, I might do it. I'm not saying I won't do it, but no, that's not me.
It's not your thing. Yeah.
I'm going to say something a little cryptic, and I'll explain why. I have plans. When I completed my sixth circumnavigation, the very last day, there are a couple of videos called Being One and Two. I said that I wouldn't, I said that was the end of that part of my life. I've divided my life to that point into longing and being, and they changed at 11 o'clock on November 2nd, 1974, when I pushed Egregious away from her slip in San Diego for my first attempt at Cape Horn. Didn't make it around the first time. Had rigging damage twice and had to come all the way back to San Diego, and did make it the third time. which I started that book. You've read it more recently than I, but the first words, the second part, are I think victory or death. I wouldn't say victory now because we don't conquer mountains or capes. We simply transit them. But I might have. It sounds more. That's more dramatic than saying completion or death. But it was a life or death commitment. I was running out of money. I've never had or wanted sponsorship or anybody been part of any of those kinds of things. Yeah, it was a total commitment.
And how has your excuse me, how has your view of sailing and your changed throughout your life? I mean, you just mentioned one part of it, but since then, how have things changed, or do you still want to continue?
Well, that's what I started to say. It changed in some ways along the way, in that I sailed parts of the third, and fourth circumnavigations with Jill, who was then my wife, and with Carol, who is now my wife. So I was willing to do that. What I started to say and got my sidetracked is that while said I wouldn't, that was the end of that part of my life. I found after about a year or so that I missed having a goal. So when I turned 80, I'm now 82, I made another 5-year plan. My first 5-year plan ended in my first attempt at Cape Horn. Second 5-year plan was when Carol and I were married and we were going to go sailing, and did in 2001. And after about a year, she decided she preferred to go back to work. So yeah, I've got a 5-year plan. If I'm still alive and healthy when I'm 85, which will be 3 years in November, I'll do something again.
All right.
What that is, I'm not going to say, because I don't like people who talk about what they're going to do. When I started, I prefer to talk about what I am doing or have done.
Mm-hmm.
When I started about the time I started the Gannett circumnavigation, a magazine ran an article, that was 2014, an article heading something like the Old Men's Circumnavigators Club. And they wrote about me, another American who was rich and had a far custom 52-foot boat, I think, made, and a Scandinavian who talks about ridiculously small boats, and in my judgment doesn't ever do much. He was going to circumnavigate from Australia, circumnavigate Antarctica, and his numbers made no sense. He said it was going to take 30,000 miles, and the circumference of this planet at the equator is 21,600, if my memory is right. And how you could do 30,000 miles from Australia to Australia around Antarctica, I don't know, 15,000 maybe. Anyway, the rich American left twice, never got beyond South Africa. The Scandinavian never left at all. He's started building another boat and talking about what he might do again.
Mm-hmm.
I made my circumnavigation. I
Mm-hmm.
left in 2014 and was back in 2019. So I'm not going to say what I'm going to do, but if I'm still alive in 3 years, stay tuned.
All right, great. Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing what you do. Well, like you said, I just finished reading for the second time Storm Passage, which was fascinating. I had forgotten how difficult of a journey that was. It was just one, I mean, in my eyes, just one harrowing experience after another. But anyway, I've highlighted some passages from it, and I thought I would read them and ask you to comment on them. So here's the first one. Oh, just changed the page accidentally. Here we go. I'm on my trusty Kindle here. Well, I love these things. Do you have one of these?
I use an iPad Mini.
Right.
I have used Kindles, but yes, I have hundreds of books on them. I use an iPad Mini because it doubles also as a chart plotter.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to sail without one of these.
I
Anyway.
would not either anymore.
All right, here we go. Now I know what is called genius stems only from an inexplicable innate belief in oneself, which in turn creates a perseverance in one's efforts that is unfailing. One cannot help but to continue to believe in oneself, so one cannot help but to persevere and endure. Once I took those virtues lightly, but they are everything but luck. You wrote this when you were approximately 50 years younger, if I'm not mistaken. Do you still feel the same way? And how did this apply to your life? How did the philosophy in that passage help you?
Okay, you broke up a little bit there, but I think I got it mostly. Let me say first about Storm Passage. Of all my books, it's the one that I have been most tempted to rewrite because uh, I was more brash then than I am now. Presumably, I've learned something in 50 years, but I'm still the same person. And I was in Storm Passage. I. It was all on the line. It always has been, but particularly on the line then because I was unproven to anyone, including myself. And Storm Passage was proving myself to myself. I was an only child. I was not close to my mother or stepfather. Grew up in the Midwest. Nobody in my family sailed. Nobody cared about it. So I invented myself. And And of perseverance, absolutely. It's I there's if you I have said in another videos made recently, um, if you quit, you've lost. So if you don't quit, if you persevere, I didn't make it around, as I said, I didn't make it around Cape Horn on my first attempt. And made it around to my third. If I'd quit after the first two, I would have lost. I would have been over it. I would have failed to prove myself to myself. There is, for me anyway, and I think for most people, if they could do it, there's great satisfaction in knowing that you are so committed to a goal, an arbitrary goal, that you will make it a matter of life or death. Um, so I did, and I've changed. I don't use the word genius. I claim only to be an original, um, and uh, I have understood, and I think that you've read Storm Passage considerably more recently than I. I haven't read it for a decade at least, maybe, and only then when the Kindle edition came out to edit it or to set it up. um, I have always understood and believed that the society, the species, creates through the genetic lottery certain individuals who are going to be original experiments. I have said that the defining responsibility of the artist is to go beyond the limits of human experience and send back reports. For some decades, I said to go to the edge of human experience. And about 10 years ago, I realized that's not right. There's no point in going to the edge. You need to go beyond the edge. So I think that I have proven that I either won or lost that genetic lottery, but that I am an original, and that was my purpose. So I don't use the word genius. I have said I wanted to lead an epic life, and I have said that I'll never know whether I have or not. Some of my friends have said that I should be more definite about that I have led an epic life and that it's quantitatively definable. But anyway, of perseverance, absolutely. I think you'll find a great many of people who are considered significant. I almost said great men or women, but that's too is a value judgment. Significant would say that they had talent, but the key was perseverance. The key was just keeping on until you prevail or get destroyed.
Yeah, I like that. I think I agree with you. I think that the difference between success and failure, like you said, is not something that's inborn talent. It's perseverance. And like you said in that quote, the perseverance comes from believing in yourself. And I think that's a great quote. I think we can all learn from that. Well, here's another one. Um, all I have wanted from society is that it be well enough structured so that I can find its edge and live there. Yet, even on the edge, I was part of herd life, and only now have the days at seas cleansed me. That's the quote that I remembered from the first time I read the book. That quote's always been in my head ever since I read the book the first time, which was 7 or 8 years ago. Uh, all I've wanted from society is that it be well enough structured that I can find its edge and live there. I mean, that's what I do too, in a different way than you do. But I love that. And I'm wondering if you still feel this way.
I do indeed. I've managed to live that way. Um, I stopped working for other people 50 years ago this November, um, and have always found my own way. And you want it structured. I don't know, it must have been 30 years or so ago. Anyway, I gave a talking tour down the west, starting in Boston, ending in Miami, sponsored by Cruising World and Boat US. And I think it was in Annapolis, and question and answer period afterwards, a woman asked me about what I thought was wrong or about American society, and I gave that exact same answer, that that all I wanted was to be well enough to for me to find the edge and live there. Um, other people, other people can try to solve the world's problems. I'm a specialist.
Hmm. Very good. Here's another one. At times in the past, I've thought I could only find fulfillment alone at sea. And at times during this voyage, I've thought I could find fulfillment nowhere. Certainly in the future, I will try to create some balance in my life, to find some way to combine the solitary, silent pleasures of the ascetic with the more human pleasures of love and the shore. I'm curious where you think fulfillment comes from, and if you did create that balance that you spoke of.
Well, obviously, I've been married to Carol for 30 years.
Very good.
It is, or 30 years in August, close enough. It, it was important to me initially to sail alone. The first circumnavigation, I left when I pushed away, I was 34. I had 74. Yeah, it was just before my 34th, 33rd birthday. Um, I left three beautiful women on the dock, all who came down to me off. They all knew of one another. Hypocrisy has never been my strong suit. But I couldn't make a commitment to any one of them. And after that, the open boat, it was certainly not for another human being. Suzanne, who was then the woman of my life and to whom I married and who I married twice, flew and actually lived with me on that little boat in harbors, to her great credit. Um, as I said, I sailed with Jill and I have sailed with Carol. So I found the balance. Different things happened, just different relationships along the way. One of the things is that certainly at least I don't know about one, I recognize that I would make certain compromises, that I'd already done much of what I needed to do with my life. And Carol and I have found ways to be together and for me to still sail and write. I think I've done 2.5 circumnavigations since we've been married, and she did 10,000 miles on one of them with me. She's a good sailor, or was. She hasn't sailed a lot. She does not like Gannett. Gannett is too small, too close to the water, and too
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And if she had been willing, instead of buying this condo, I would have accepted our buying a more comfortable, larger boat. We could have afforded a hell of a boat for what we paid just for the renovation of this condo.
Right.
But her sailing days are done, other than day sailing a little bit here and there.
Hmm.
So yeah, I found the balance. I've been fortunate to do that.
And just in general, where do you think fulfillment comes from?
It's a good question. I hadn't thought of it particularly. I think it comes naturally, obviously, without thinking about it, without aiming. I think it comes from doing what you were born to do.
Mm.
And by born, uh, I'm not claiming this is science, but it's my experience and from life, and as being a voracious reader, um, I think an awful lot of our lives are set at beyond our control at the moment of birth. Um, what we got for the genetic lottery, where we're born, when, and to whom, we have absolutely no control over those things, and they're decisive in who we are in much of our lives. Chance can still happen, but I think it's probably I think it's fulfilling whatever you got from those factors, and again the genetic lottery.
Yeah.
I'm 82 and I'm getting over COVID. Well, I am over COVID, but I'm still testing positive. But I won most of the genetic lottery in terms of health. I don't remember the last time I was ill, years ago, with even a cold. But I take no medications. I still use my body hard. I normally, I haven't done it for the last week and a half since I had COVID, but I normally work out 6 times a week. I can and still do my age in push-ups. Always been able to do my age in push-ups. And if you keep adding one a year, you can get to 82. Another thing that was the same, I just thought of this. That was the same thing, talk in Annapolis that same night. And somebody asked, I was in my 50s then, if this was 52 or 3 or 4, whatever it was. And somebody asked how I stayed in shape. I'm 6'1" and weigh 153 pounds, and which is what I weighed when I graduated from college. Never gained weight. And so somebody asked how I keep in shape. And I said, I work out and I do my age in push-ups. And I said, just think what great shape I'll be in when I'm 100. Well, that was 30 years ago, and I'm getting close to 100. I
Wow.
occasionally go to 100. I try to go to 100 about once a month.
Wow.
But anyway, so I won that part of the genetic lottery, clearly.
Hmm. No, I like that. I think you're absolutely right when you said that fulfillment comes from doing what you were born to do. That's a very good answer. I feel the same way. I feel like a lot of my life has been a search to find what I was born to do. And the last 4 years, I've been living on this sailboat and sailing full time. And finally, I feel like I'm doing the things I was born to do and finding fulfillment. Yeah, that was a good answer. I like it. All right, here's another one. I want the sea for my unmarked grave, but if I must have an epitaph, winds and waves of torment cease to become a poem of this senseless voyage. Smile, fool, and sail on. Yeah, I love that refrain. Smile, fool, and sail on. Um, yeah, what is
There's
that?
go ahead.
I was going to say, what does that mean? Smile, fool, and sail on.
Well, that's a paraphrase of William Butler Yeats' epitaph for himself.
Ah,
Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by. I think I may not have the words right, but because I haven't thought of that for a long time. And the word senseless in there is meant to have double meaning. Um, Senseless, sense, eyes, hearing, seeing, and all the rest of it, and all of it. But the thing about sailing on, um, I I still try to do.
well, I've got another one here. I've got a bunch.
All
Hope you're
right.
enjoying this. I am. Uh, Several times I've talked about feelings and presentiments that could be considered superstitious. I do not believe that they are at all, um, but rather the natural consequence of having been at sea so long that I'm so sensitive to it, I can form judgments from observations and subtle impressions of which I may not even be consciously aware. I'm wondering if this ability developed throughout your life, and if so, can you give some examples of feeling presentiments that could be considered superstitious?
Well, yeah, I'm not superstitious in any way whatsoever. I'm also not religious. Um, I I have said, and without meaning to undermine anybody else's religion, uh, but that it is possible to be in force 12 storms and not cry out for God or man to save you.
Mhm.
Um, I think I also do not engage in the pathetic fallacy, which is attributing to inanimate objects or forces uh, personalities. There's no the sea is not cruel or treacherous. Those are human qualities. The sea just is. Uh, I, I On that first, well, I think that if you're out there long enough, and maybe we're animals, we are instinctive animals who are designed not to go to sea particularly, but to be wandering around the savannas of Africa. I don't think we were designed to be in cities, and I don't like being in cities anymore
Me either.
at all. Um, and uh, and the majority, and it was only what 10 years or so that the majority of our species started living in cities, and I think that in urban areas, and I think that by 2050 it's going to be 70%. Well, better them than me. Out there, if you are in tune with it, and I think this is particularly true if you're by yourself, I think it could probably be very significantly compromised by those people who go to sea now and who blog home every day, or blog back to the mainland every day, or make a phone call back every day. I think those people have never really left the land behind. Whether or not that would compromise their sensitivity, animal sensitivity that's going on out there, I don't know. In terms of storm passage, when you ask for an example, um, well, let me back up. When I go to sea, I have no contact with anybody at all. I don't go out there to have conversations. I do, well, there is a single slight exception to that. I now carry a yellow brick tracking device. You can send emails on that. You could send an SOS, which I hope I never do. So once a week, usually on Saturday mornings, I carry it not to communicate with anybody, but so Carol can see where I am and see that I'm still making progress. Usually Saturday mornings, I send her she's the only one who has that email address. And I say, I'm fine. And she sends back an email, me too, and that's the end of it. But being out there, I think you'd have to become sensitive, if you are at all sensitive, to what's going on. I don't get any outside information when I'm making a passage. I do along this coast sometimes, which is often more of a nuisance than not because it's often wrong. I look at the sky, I look at the sea, I look at the barometer. Um, and while I do that particularly towards sunset, and while I have had some false positives, in other words, thought when I looked around, well, something might happen tonight, and it didn't. I don't ever remember having a false negative of looking around and saying, it's going to be okay tonight, and it wasn't. Well, once down in the Southern Ocean, one night in particular, it's pitch black. And this is somewhere in Storm Passage. And if I don't have these details exactly right, believe what's in the books, because I'm talking about something that happened to me almost 50 years ago, and my memory is still pretty good, but I can make mistakes. But it was night, it was very dark, the wind was blowing pretty hard, 20, 25 knots, and all of a sudden, I sensed that something, couldn't see anything. I mean, you couldn't see, the sky was completely black. And so it wasn't visual, or at least I don't think it was. Maybe it was just a sense of pressure, a barometric change on the skin. I do not know. Maybe I heard something. I don't recall that at this stage. All of a sudden, I said to myself, you have got to get sail down. I had no furling. I didn't have furling gear on, egregious. It was new then. I didn't trust. It wasn't proven, and I probably couldn't have afforded it. So it was cutter rigged. She was cutter rigged, and I had the storm jib was set as a staysail, and I can't remember what sails I took down, pushed down, I tied the jib, or would have tied the jib to the forepeak. Anyway, I got sail off of her. I don't remember exactly how much. Maybe I don't think I got it all off of her. I probably put a reef in the main. Sure enough, in 10 minutes, it was blowing 40 knots. So
Wow.
that's an example. There are others, but that one came to mind.
Wow. Yeah, that's a useful skill.
Well, it is useful, but I think it's innate. I think it's a useful animal skill, and we
Yeah.
are animals.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point that if you fine tune and hone your senses by being in touch with your surroundings, you can develop that skill and use it to your advantage. By the way, where did you get the name why did you choose the name, if you did choose it, egregious, which I believe means with malicious intent?
No, no. Okay, no. It's a good question. I used it as the root of the word, the Latin grex, herd, out of the herd. Well, that was
Oh,
what I was going to do on that.
oh,
Egregious, when you look it up in the dictionary, it now means something that is unusually bad, an egregious error, for example. Um, but if you look at the etymology of the word, in the past, it meant something that was very good. And when you think about that, how this flipped, it flipped with democracy. In, it flipped with the glorification of, in our own time, with the media, the internet has provided a deification of the mob,
ah,
where the standard is set by the lowest common denominator, really.
ah,
So, but
okay,
something out of the, I used it in the root of the word,
okay.
away from the herd. And I certainly, that's what I was doing, and that's what I did.
Well, if I was a superstitious person, which I'm not, but if I was, I would think that your boat probably thought that that it was the newer meaning.
Folks don't think.
Folks don't think. No,
Folks don't think.
nope, nope. All right, here's another one. Is my desire for grandeur stronger than that for love? I often think that those men who compromise or abandon their dreams do so from a pathetic inability to imagine their own deaths. They live as though death were optional. I know that I could not contentedly face my death after a life in which I was no more than a lover of women. I'm mostly interested in the part about imagining your own death. I think that's an interesting uh, viewpoint.
Well, in death was never just theoretical to me. My mother and father separated before I was born, so I hardly knew him. But he committed. I think I saw him maybe 20 minutes in my life. But he committed suicide when I was 8 or 9 years old. Both of my grandfathers died before age 40, and it is odd that who took by far the greater risks, have now more than doubled their
Mhm.
lives. As I've said, that might have been pure chance, but I don't think I've never considered myself lucky. It probably was because I planned and prepared to the extent of my resources. I never did anything at the last minute. And though I took risks, I've never taken an uncalculated risk. So the fact that, well, as I said, death was real to me from childhood. And I would still stick by. It, it, I have said, and I've changed this too. I mean, I've evolved over 50 years, the last 50 years. Um, and at one time, I used to say that I was well, I've always said three things: wind, words, women. Um, and so once somebody sent me a thing about define yourself in 6 words: an artist of wind, words, women. Hardly anybody else that I know can do that so well for themselves. Try it sometime. So I used to say I was a writer more than anything else, but I've changed my mind about that too. They were all equally important, but the women had to be deferred until I made the voyages.
Mhm.
That was just that. I mean, that just had to be the way it was.
Yep.
I wonder what happened to those 3 women who, I mean, I saw them a little bit afterwards, but then our lives went totally different way. I haven't heard from any of them for 30, 40 years or more. And they were good women. They were great women. Well, at least 2 of them were. And I hope their lives turned out well, but I don't know.
Mhm. You've been fairly, I mean, from what little I know of your life, you've been close to death at least a few times. Um, can you think of a time when you've been very close to death,
Well,
like the closest?
as I have, as, as I've said elsewhere, well, a couple of things on that. Almost dying is a hard way to make a living.
Yep.
And from the 70s through the 90s, I was in a survival situation almost every year. So there were countless times. I mean, I've put the mastheads of 4 boats in the water, which is a club that you probably don't want to join. Anytime you put the masthead of egregious one in multiple times, Gannett's been in multiple times. Sometimes Hawkatu Tunella was in. One of my hardest passages was on that fourth circumnavigation, from Cape Town to Fremantle. I think I was in 8 gale force wind, 8 times that wind went gale force, 4 times I think it went above force 12. And in one of those, we took a knockdown, and I wasn't sure, as I wasn't with Gannon one time, whether the masthead had really gone in the water, until I found I had no wind instruments. And when I could stick my head up, found that everything up there had been whooped out. Well, in my experience, when I have taken knockdowns, they're very quick experiences, and the keel pulls you back up very quickly. I've never done a 360, gone down and come back up. Every one of those was probably a life or death experience. The two that were most obvious were when I was sailing the open boat. Between Fiji and what's now Vanuatu, one night, about halfway in between, 300 miles off land, we hit something. I was sleeping. I slept on the floorboards on that boat. We probably hit a container floating. Anyway, she somersaulted, she pit pulled, threw me out. She was swamped. She had flotation that would kept her from sinking, but I couldn't get the water out. The centerboard slot was full of water. I pumped up the inflatable with my arms, tied them together, and drifted 300 miles to the nearest land over 3 weeks. 2 weeks, excuse me, 2 weeks, and reached land. So all of that time I was there. And then I sank Resurgam off of Fort Lauderdale and was in the water swimming, floating for 26 hours, and the Gulf Stream carried me 130 miles. Those two were most dramatic. But there were others. I mean,
yeah,
lots of them.
Sure. I'm wondering if you ever had any revelations while you were close to death.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I almost drowned once and passed out underwater, and woke up on the surface and had a dream while I was out, and it was sort of gave me the sense that it wasn't my time yet. Somebody was talking to me in the dream and telling me something, and it was as if I was taking in some necessary information while I was halfway across, and then I was sent back. So that kind of changed the way I view everything, just a little bit. So I was just curious if you ever had any similar kind of experience, or if you think that our times are not up until they're up, and that there's a particular time or a mission we're on or something that we have to complete before we're done. Or are you just totally not superstitious enough to believe any of that?
I don't believe in any of that. I think that chance plays a big part of it. But the idea that we have a certain time implies a force or power that sets that time. And
yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but when I look at the pictures taken by the James Webb telescope, looking out into space, well, I need to back up because I just found out a couple of facts in the last year or so. It was only 100 years ago, roughly, that Hubble looked at a photographic plate, and saw an image that made him realize, up to that point, scientists thought that the Milky Way was the entire universe. Well, 100 years ago, he saw something that said, no, there's more out there than just this.
He saw another galaxy.
And it was only 25 years ago that 2 teams of scientists, I wrote about this in my journal, I don't remember where I came across because I read a lot, 2 teams of scientists who were trying independently to determine how fast the universe was collapsing, were surprised to find that it isn't collapsing, it's expanding, and it's expanding at an ever greater rate. And they discovered dark energy and dark matter, which compose, according to scientists, I'm not a scientist, but I'm going to take this on their statement. What we see of the universe, the stuff that we are, is about 6% of the universe. So it was only 25 years ago that we found the other 95%, 94% of the universe. Well, so certain of the things that our species has thought and certain of the religious myths that we tell each other on this planet, I think are very seriously undermined when you look out now and is 14 billion light years across or some such. It's unimaginably huge. It is
Yeah.
the greatest wretched excess imaginable.
Yeah.
And I think it makes us, our concerns and our beliefs highly unlikely.
Definitely. That all drives home the point that, infinity is beyond our conception. And just as an ant would never be able to understand a human, we are probably incapable of understanding whatever is above us, if there is anything.
I
And
think that is,
yeah, and I think probably a lot of the religions arise from trying to figure that out, but being unable to, and interpreting something the only way they could. Maybe they got a glimpse of something bigger and
yeah.
interpreted it as their minds 2,000 years ago were capable of. But anyway,
I was long ago philosophy major and ended up deciding that I could define Western philosophy in 4 words: good questions, bad answers.
yeah, very good. I like that. Well, we were talking about death a minute ago, and you wrote a poem about it. Would you like to read that? Do you have that one with you?
I
Or if
do.
or
If
if not that one, another one would
computer will
be.
come back, if okay, on the other side. Um, well, this dates back more than 50 years. It was the year that I bought my first boat. I was living in Oakland and took of sailing. The first time I sailed alone was I took delivery in Excalibur 26 at Jack London Square in Oakland, and I didn't know anything. I mean, I taught myself how to sail out of books, and then having that boat on San Francisco Bay, and then sailing down to San Diego and continuing. Point of this is the first time I had ordered an outboard. He didn't have the outboard. The dealer didn't have the outboard on the boat. No winch handles, and he took advantage of my ignorance and sold me a 170% Genoa. So the first time I sail alone, I sail from Jack London Square out the Alameda Channel and around to Berkeley, where I had a slip, which was a downwind slip, as a matter of fact. Well, I've never had 170% Genoa since, and you certainly don't need one in San Francisco Bay. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I did that, got in. My hands are bleeding from handling the sheets and whatever, and naturally a downwind slip. I hit the bow on the dock, but not too seriously. But anyway, that's the same time as this poem, as a matter of fact. Um, Her laughter is so far from me, it does not seem I ever knew it. Odd, for I'm not even sad, only tired of imagining. I spend my days besides the sea, waiting until I can be free. Though now I doubt that can be. Think of me. I am already dead to everyone I knew, and every place I've been, I am already dead. Think of me. Some afternoon off Berkeley as you sail across the bay, look out into the water and think of me. I am not there to think of me, and as you kiss him, think of me. Did I love you? Think of me. And although you never knew me, and though I am now surely dead, someday when I am deader, think of me in the evening when you are alone and quiet. Think of me. Yet, even as I ask it, I am somehow pleased to know that I might as well ask seagulls eating fish contentedly to think of me.
Very good. Was that was
Thank
that
you.
written to a particular person?
I had one in mind. One of the women. It was one of the women. It was one of the women who saw me off 7 years ago. 7 years ago. 7 years later in San Diego. She and
Yeah.
I lived together on and off for well, for 7 or 8 years, and almost got married, uh, and but didn't. So
Hmm.
we must have been having a moment, and it was a time also when I was. It was you know it it was it took a long time for me to get free of to get enough money. I didn't have a lot. I I uh, I probably had about $10,000, which in 1974 money would be, I don't have any idea what it'd be now, but considerably more when I left on my first attempt at Cape Horn. I had good literary agent. Um, and But when I got back, I had only a couple of $1,000s in the world, um, and put the boat up, and the book was, they both sold. The book was published by Times Books, then a part of the New York Times, and the boat sold. So then I had some freedom. Starvation was not so close.
Hmm. Are you still writing?
Yes, still get published, although I don't bother anymore much, because they pay. An article of mine will be in Sail magazine next month or two, called, I don't know, Voyage to Nowhere, I think they called it. I went sailing off maybe last year, just headed offshore just to go sailing, and was trying to pick wind angles.
Hmm.
Um, it's an interesting fact is that when I finished that first circumnavigation, I had finished the book that became Storm Passage. And I took, and it's sold, as I said. So I took two parts of it. The one about being around off of Cape Horn, rounding Cape Horn, and one of the cyclone in the Tasman being capsized. And I sent one to Sail, one to Yachting, which was they were the big magazines then. And the editor of Sail, they both sold. And the editor of Sail, who was a woman with a great name, Patience Wales, W-A-L-E-S, a good New England name. She was a good New England woman. Sent me a letter. This is back then, saying, call me. And so I did. And we developed a report. And so I wrote for Sail for the next 20, 25 years until she retired. Well, so Sail, far different editor, just bought this article. And it works out that I'm being paid in 2023, got paid last year for the article appearing this year, about 1/10 of what I was paid in 1976
Oh,
when you work
geez.
it out in inflation.
Okay.
They beg poverty due to the internet, and that may even be true.
Hmm.
But that's not a good career path. But the
Yeah.
money doesn't anymore. It mattered. It mattered. It was critical for in the 70s through the 90s. And you, if there were an exact Webb Chiles right now who was in his 20s, well, he couldn't make a living as I did that way for those 20 years. Now, he might well make more money from social media some way or another, of which I am ignorant and have no desire. I don't participate in social media. But he couldn't make it as a writer as I did, not being paid what they're paying now.
Are you considering writing a book about your circumnavigation in Gannett?
No, I published the passage. The passage log is published. The passage log for the whole voyage is published on my site. But no, I don't think I've been asked to do that, and maybe I will if I get bored over the next 2 or 3 years. But I don't. It's enough. The passage log is there if people want to read it.
Hmm. Unrelated question that I'm curious about. If you were going to buy a cruising sailboat today, what would it be? Or do you have any idea?
If I were going to buy
a sailboat today, a cruising sailboat, like say one to cruise on.
Okay, as I said, I've never. People normally, divide sailors arbitrarily into two groups: racers and cruisers.
Hmm.
And I say I'm just a sailor. But I did cruise with Jill and Carol for a while. I don't know what that. If you're talking about cruising as in a sort of conventional manner with one other person, I've never wanted a boat for more than one other person. Or
Hmm.
I have said that I stopped at 37. I had a 35, a 36, a 37. You've got a 40-footer. They're about the same. I would not go above that size, that range. I have said that if it can't fit in a 37-foot boat, I don't want to own it.
Hmm.
Well, I own a lot of stuff by proxy with Carol that wouldn't fit in a 37-foot boat now. I would now say if it won't fit in Gannett, I don't need it. I mean, I've lived aboard that little boat during the circumnavigation for probably a couple of years.
Hmm.
And as you pointed out, with I don't need to carry a couple hundred books. I have hundreds of books. I have hundreds of albums of music in my phone and in my iPad Mini and in my iPad Pro. They're all of which are my chart plotters as well.
Hmm.
So anyway, I could live by myself in Gannett now,
Hmm.
but it would be a boat in the 37 to 35 to 40 foot range. It would ha certainly have a fin keel spade rudder. Um, I'm not opposed to multi-hulls. I just don't have any experience with them, and I might be. I kind of would have been interested in a try, but there weren't any tries that I. They were all too expensive for me. I've always had inexpensive boats. It's not really a consideration anymore. Uh, as I say, we could have bought a hell of a boat for just the renovation of this place.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know particularly what it would be. I kind of like Express 37s, which are a big version of Gannett, but I would have made compromises with Carol if she'd wanted to live aboard and go sailing. I mean, I've never had refrigeration. I've never had pressure water. Um, I would have been willing to do those that's on a boat, a Swan, a Baltic, uh, an Express 37, which is a bit more radical. Something in that
Hmm.
size, though. No,
Hmm.
nothing bigger. One of my experiences over the last 50 years is that the average, quote, cruising boat has gotten at least 10 feet bigger. Uh, when I
Hmm.
sailed Egregious, 37 feet, I didn't stop much with her, but she was in Tahiti and she was in New Zealand, and she was about the normal size for a boat that was being sailed around the world. Well, Tuonela is the same size boat, 37. And when she was in harbor, she was usually one of the smallest boats being sailed around the world. Um, the, the, the average now, I think, is 45, 47 feet, and it might well be a catamaran.
Hmm.
And I don't have experience with those, but the kind of catamarans that those are, I don't sail very well. I don't see how they can. They're
Hmm.
floating mobile homes.
Hmm. Yeah, I see a lot of catamarans, here in Panama and also in the Bahamas. And there's
Yep.
definitely a wide variety. Some of them there's a beautiful one here right now that's bright red. It's got dagger boards sticking up and it looks like a fast performance cat. And of course there's big, comfortable house on floats looking cats too. There's, and everything in between. But I'm curious about catamarans too. If I was if money were no option, I would certainly be considering the catamaran. I think that's a cool option. I love monohulls for aesthetic reasons, and for other reasons, but I'm flexible too. I think all boats are cool. I think canoes are cool and catamaran and kayaks, and I used to have a sailing and rowing dinghy that I loved. I think anything that gets you out on the water is what it is great. That's whatever it takes to get you out on the water, whatever kind of craft, I'm all for it. Whatever kind of boat it is. I like to swim
As am
without a
I.
boat. I like to swim with nothing. That's fun too. Yep. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we go that I haven't asked you? Anything at all?
Nothing comes to mind particularly.
All right.
Um, yep.
Would you like to read your poem "Departure" for closing?
Yeah. I'm going to have to get this back on and scroll down to it. I actually know this one probably by heart, but there we go. Uh, to me, one thing that's interesting is that publishers have often changed the titles of my books. Uh, Storm Passage I was in San Diego living with Suzanne, and got a phone call about 6 in the morning from New York, and I wanted to call the book Egregious. And so I get a phone call and get awakened. And they say, we're having a meeting. we want to change the title to Storm Passage. What do you think of that? And I said, not much. And they said, come up with a in the next hour, or that's what we're going to do. So that's what they did. They decided that egregious, nobody knew what the word meant, and it was too confusing, and whatever, it doesn't matter. The second as you pointed out, the first open boat book was called The Open Boat Across the Pacific. And I can't remember if I called the next one The Open Boat Across the Indian Ocean or whatever, because it covered from when I reached land after the pitch pole in the Pacific until I locked up as a spy in Saudi Arabia a couple of years later. Same boat. Anyway, I wrote that, and so then I was off sailing, and the book was at the publisher. And the publisher, without ever telling me, changed the title to The Ocean Waits, which was a better title than mine, whatever it was. In the same way, if I could talk about titles briefly, the first passage I made on Gannett circumnavigation out from San Diego to Hilo, Hawaii. I can't remember what my title was, but there was a line in which I said, an old man is standing in the companionway, sailing west, and the boat is moving well, and he thinks, use yourself up, old man, use yourself up. Well, Mark Pillsbury, who was the editor of Cruising World at the time, changed the title to Use Yourself Up, Old Man, which was a much better title. I like to think that I'm still not used up. We'll see. Anyway, this departure is where what's now called departure is where the lines The Ocean Waits are in. Judge a man then by that against which he must strive. Against what, if not this soft night and the wind and sea? Against the myth he must become and his own will. To measure or to slay me, the ocean waits, and I will sail.
Wonderful. I love that.
Thank you.
Well, Webb, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Always nice well, it's always good. I don't talk much, but it's nice to talk to somebody about sailing some.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Stick around, stay on the line just for a minute after we say goodbye.
All right.
Thanks again, Webb, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.